He stared at the screen again, numbers frozen at 0. No views, no comments, not even a single accidental click. The desert stretched endlessly across his mind, barren, colorless, silent. He thought he was building something, yet all he saw was nothing. The silence felt like mockery. But what if this silence was not the enemy, but the test? What if 0 views is where the few are forged and the many are broken? He dragged himself through another day of edits, thumbnails, titles. Each upload fell like a stone into a bottomless well. No splash, no echo. The world did not care. He whispered, "Maybe I am not meant for this." But far away, in the winds of that inner desert, a voice whispered back, not soft, but carved from stone. Endure. The word sliced through the emptiness. It was not comfort, it was command. He remembered something Marcus Aurelius once wrote while standing against collapsing empires. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The thought pierced him like the desert sun. He had been waiting for proof that his work mattered, waiting for permission to keep going, waiting for applause before effort. But here was the truth he didn't want. You do the work, not because the world watches, but because the work is what makes you worthy to be seen. Yet his mind rebelled. What is the point if no one notices? What is the purpose of speaking to an empty room? That's when Seneca the Younger appeared in his thoughts, cloaked in shadows of an ancient study lit only by a dying flame. He imagined Seneca leaning forward and saying, "The man who is brave is free. Even if chained in obscurity, he is freer than those enslaved by the approval of crowds. Those who depend on applause are never free. They are prisoners of noise." Something cracked inside him. A quiet shattering. He saw how he had built chains from metrics, from dopamine, from the worship of numbers. Every 0 view felt like a knife because he had made visibility his god. But now, alone in the sandstorm of silence, he began to see the hidden architecture of freedom. When no one watches you, you are finally free to become dangerous, because you have nothing left to lose. Still, doubt clawed at him. How long can I endure this? How long can anyone walk this desert without collapsing? That's when Epictetus stepped into his imagination, a crippled slave turned philosopher who taught emperors from the chains they could never see. He heard Epictetus say, "You are not disturbed by things, but by the view you take of them. These numbers do not hurt you. Your judgment about them does. Change the judgment. Change the battle." The words struck like thunder. 0 views was not the enemy. His expectations were. He realized he had entered this desert believing it owed him water, applause, momentum, but deserts owe nothing. The desert only strips you until the false parts die. The creator who survives this place becomes something else, someone who does not need the world to approve before he acts, someone who creates like breathing, someone who cannot be broken. And that's when something shifted. He looked again at the empty analytics and felt something new. Power. The silence was not absence. It was resistance. And resistance is proof that transformation is near. The desert was not killing him. It was carving him. Every upload into the void was a swing of the chisel. Every ignored effort was fire-hardening steel. The pain meant he was shedding the version of himself that only created to be seen, and becoming the one who creates to become. If this story has gripped something deep in you, then take this moment as your own first step out of the illusion. Subscribe to this channel not as entertainment, but as your daily reminder to rise. It is a way to walk closer to God, to flood your days with purpose, and to be blessed with stories that sharpen your soul. Write something in the comments as your declaration, words like strength, light, or discipline, and let them mark the day you began. He rose from his chair, not triumphant, but anchored. The desert had not changed. The numbers had not moved. Yet he felt taller. A strange calm filled him. He understood now that the views had never been the real battle. The battle had always been against his own hunger for validation, against the whisper that said if no one sees you, you do not exist. He smiled at that whisper now. It had lost its teeth. The desert still waited, wide, merciless, and silent. But he no longer feared it. He had learned to love the emptiness, because it gave him room to become. Every video would now be a brick in his fortress of discipline. Every silent upload a secret oath. He would become relentless. The world would break before he did. Somewhere in the distance, he could almost hear the faint sound of the first crack, the sound of the desert beginning to notice. He thought surviving the first silence was victory, but the desert had only begun. Days blurred together like cracked glass. He rose, created, posted, vanished. No response. It was not rejection. Rejection would at least have sound. This was erasure. He was not hated. He was unseen. And that is a deeper wound, because it whispers that maybe you do not exist, that maybe your effort dissolves into air. Each morning he sat before the glow of the screen like a priest before an indifferent god. He offered his work to an altar that never answered. He doubted his skill, then his worth, then his right to speak at all. But deep within, another voice now stirred, slow, cold, and immovable. It said, "Good. Let the silence strip you. This is where false creators die. This is where the real ones are born." In his mind, Marcus Aurelius appeared again, standing like an iron statue in the storm. The emperor's eyes were carved with fatigue, yet steady as mountains. He spoke without moving his lips, and the words slammed into the young creator's mind like iron gates closing. Stop hoping the world will crown you. Crown yourself. Discipline is the only throne that cannot be taken. The world may ignore you, but it cannot dethrone what it did not build. That thought detonated inside him. He saw that every time he checked numbers, he was giving away his crown. He was kneeling before strangers who did not even know he existed. He was letting them decide if he mattered. The desert revealed the sickness. He had confused attention for value, but attention is a mirage. It appears bright and close, yet vanishes when chased. Value is built in the dark, brick by unseen brick. So he decided to vanish from the noise and descend fully into the silence. No more checking analytics, no more watching trends, no more chasing the stampede. He would build like an ancient craftsman carving stone in a cave, unseen, unheard, unthanked, yet leaving something immortal behind. It terrified him. It freed him. For the first time, he understood that the desert was not punishment. It was sanctuary. Days turned to weeks. The world outside moved like lightning, yet inside the desert nothing changed. His hands worked. His mind raged. His soul began to burn clean. In the quiet, he could hear his own cowardice screaming. It begged him to stop, to rest, to wait for a sign, but he had stopped waiting. He had buried the part of him that craved applause like oxygen. He now breathed something colder, purer, duty. Seneca the Younger appeared beside him, draped in dust. The ancient philosopher's face was weathered like old marble, eyes sharp as broken glass. "Fortune has no power over the man who needs nothing," he said. That sentence coiled around the Creator's heart like a chain and a key. He realized that if he could need nothing, if he could want nothing from the world, then the world could never break him again. He began to test this power. Each time he uploaded, he whispered, "I expect nothing." Each time he created, he thought, "This is not for them. This is for the man I am becoming." Slowly, the poison drained from his veins. He no longer felt the spike of hope before publishing, nor the crash of despair after silence. He became flat, cold, steady, like stone, like the desert itself. But the silence struck back. It grew heavier, like invisible hands pressing on his chest. He dreamed of being forgotten forever, buried under the endless sands. Doubt hissed that his work would die with him, that the world would never know he even tried. Yet a strange answer rose from within. Good. Let it die. Let your name vanish. Let the work outlive you without needing to carry your face. That is freedom. That is immortality. Epictetus emerged in that dream, walking with a limp across the sand, eyes burning like coals. If you wish to be invincible, want nothing outside your own control, he said. The words echoed like thunder through the void. He understood then. Views are not in his control. Applause is not in his control. Only his discipline is. Only his effort. Only his soul. And if he owns those, he loses nothing. When he woke, something had changed. The desert still stretched around him, silent, endless, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt like a forge. The silence was heat. The obscurity was pressure. The zero views were hammers. They were breaking the weak metals from his soul and revealing steel. He no longer begged the world to notice. He no longer feared being unseen. He was becoming something more dangerous than famous. He was becoming inevitable. He had changed, though the world could not see it. The desert had not shrunk, yet his steps no longer faltered. The silence that once shredded him now wrapped around him like a cloak. Still, it waited. Still, it tested. Because the desert does not reward effort, it rewards endurance. And endurance is a cruel teacher. He rose each morning to the same void, the same blank graph, the same ritual, build, refine, post, vanish. He had stopped checking comments, there were none. He had stopped tracking analytics, there was nothing to track. The desert taught him this. When you release your work, you must let it go like ashes in the wind. If it returns, it returns. If it does not, you keep walking. The desert devours those who look back. At first, this discipline was armor, but over time, it became something stranger, an inner stillness. It frightened him. He thought perhaps he was going numb, but numbness is hollow. This was dense, solid, heavy with power, like a mountain cooling after fire. The silence still hurt, but the pain no longer bent him. It forged him. Pain had stopped being a signal to quit and had become proof that he was still becoming. Inside that stillness, he began to see the hidden mechanisms of his mind. He saw how often he reached for distractions, how often he imagined applause that never came, how he fantasized about escape. He watched those impulses rise like smoke and then vanish into the dry air. He stopped chasing them. He let them die. This was when the desert revealed its second secret. When nothing outside you moves, you finally see what is inside you. And what he saw was chaos. His mind was a swarm. Ideas scattered, half-built. Doubts buzzed like flies. Memories of every failure clawed at him. He realized he had never truly been alone with himself before. The world had always filled the silence with noise, voices, screens, likes, trends, praise. Now all of that was gone, and only he remained. It was terrifying. It was liberation. In that emptiness, Marcus Aurelius appeared again, not as a roaring conqueror but seated cross-legged on bare sand, head bowed, hands resting like carved stone. Look within. Within is the fountain of good. The emperor's voice was low as thunder buried under miles of earth, and the young creator understood. He had been searching for power outside, in numbers, attention, applause, but the true fountain was within, buried under layers of fear and hunger. He began to dig. Each day he stripped away distractions. He rose before the world stirred, while the sky was still ink. No phone, no music, no noise. Just him, the blank page, and the ache of discipline. At first, the silence roared. His thoughts screamed, but he kept carving, and slowly, faintly, something rose from the dust. His voice. Not the voice shaped to please. Not the voice bent to algorithms. The voice he had hidden because he feared it would not be loved. It was raw, cracked, unpolished. It was real. He realized then, The desert is not trying to kill your voice. It is trying to strip away the voices that are not yours. That is why so few survive it. Most abandon their true voice and mimic the noise that gets views. They escape the desert but lose themselves. He would not. He would walk until only the true voice remained, even if it took his whole life. But this awakening came with agony, because once he found that voice, he saw how much of his old work was hollow. He watched his past creations with cold eyes. They were clever but empty, beautiful but lifeless. He had built them to be consumed, not to endure. They were shells. He wanted to destroy them. Yet a whisper rose, "Do not destroy, transform. Every failed attempt is stone for your fortress." Seneca the Younger emerged then, cloaked in twilight. Words like dry steel. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. The sentence struck him like a hammer to the ribs. He saw the years he had burned chasing validation, the hours spent sculpting what others might like instead of what he must say. The desert ripped the illusion away. Time is the only currency, and he had squandered it on applause that never came. Rage filled him. It burned hotter than despair. He slammed his hands on the desk. Enough. No more pandering. No more bending. He would create as if no one would ever see it, and yet as if the work must still be worthy of eternity, because that is what the desert demands. The discipline to make what may never be seen, yet still make it as if it will outlast empires. He changed everything. He tore apart his routines. He rewrote his scripts from the bones outward. He hunted the truth like a predator. Every word had to bleed. Every frame had to carry his soul. No more filler. No more fear. He created as if each video would be the last artifact left when the world turned to dust. The desert watched silently. The silence deepened, and still the numbers did not move. The graph was a flat line. Yet inside, he felt movement. He was becoming a blade. He spoke with new gravity. Even if no one heard, he knew the words could cut. And then something stranger happened. He stopped needing them to cut. He created, and when he finished, he felt complete. Not proud. Complete. The outcome no longer mattered. The doing was enough. Epictetus appeared then, standing in the wind like a blackened pillar. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The words coiled through him like molten iron. He realized he had never declared who he would be. He had only reacted, drifted, hoped. Now he spoke the words aloud, each like a vow. I will be relentless. I will be disciplined. I will be free. From that day, he carried those words like armor. He carved them into his mind each morning, as if they were laws older than the world. He became ritual. He became stone. The silence did not break him. It could not, because there was nothing left to break. The world had not changed, but he had. The man who feared 0 views had died. In his place walked someone the world could not starve because he had learned to feed on the work itself. And still, the desert stretched on, endless, silent, watching. The desert did not announce its shift. It never does. It tests in silence, then rewards in whispers. He had walked so long that he stopped counting the days. The calendar lost meaning. The metrics were ghosts. Yet something strange began to happen. Not outside, but inside. The silence, once crushing, now felt like space, wide, expansive, endless, a place he could move in without fear. He noticed how his hands no longer trembled before uploading, how his breath stayed calm as he pressed publish, how his mind no longer jolted toward the analytics page like a starving animal. The ritual had become pure, not a hunt for reward, but an act of becoming. The desert had rewired him. He was no longer creating to be seen. He was creating to become someone worth seeing. And yet, the world remained unmoved. No spikes, no comments, no applause, nothing. Still, something deep in him whispered, "It's working." He could not explain why. It was not hope, it was knowing, like the buried tremor of tectonic plates shifting miles beneath the sand. Nothing on the surface moved, but the foundation had cracked. That was when Marcus Aurelius appeared again, now not as a statue nor a ghost, but as a man walking beside him through the dunes. The emperor's armor was gone. He wore only a simple cloak, sand whipping his face, eyes like cold suns. What stands in the way becomes the way. The words were flat, almost casual, but they detonated inside the young creator. He realized he had spent months trying to escape the obstacle, the obscurity, the silence, the zero views, when the obstacle was the path itself. He had been begging the desert to end, not realizing the desert was the training ground. The emptiness was not blocking him from becoming who he needed to be. It was building him into it. This shift split him open. He stopped seeing the silence as punishment and began to see it as weight training for the soul. Every day with zero views was like dragging chains through sand. Invisible chains, every step burned. But chains build strength. Silence builds gravity. So he leaned into it. He increased his load. He took on harder ideas, deeper scripts, longer edits. He pushed until his body trembled. The desert roared nothing back, and he smiled. Seneca the Younger appeared at night, sitting by an imaginary fire in the black void. The firelight carved his face in shadow and gold. "Difficulty strengthens the mind," he said, "as labor does the body." The young creator nodded silently. He could feel it now, the strengthening, not in his muscles or even his skills, but deeper, in that place where will is forged. He began to notice tiny things. His focus sharpened. Hours passed like minutes. Tasks that once drained him became effortless. His voice, once uncertain, cut with precision. He stopped deleting drafts. He finished everything. The discipline no longer felt forced. It was instinct. This was the third secret of the desert. At first you drag discipline like a boulder, but if you endure, discipline begins to carry you. The world still gave no sign that it saw him. But sometimes, in the dead hours of night, a single view appeared. Just one, then vanished. He told himself it meant nothing. He knew it had to mean nothing. That was the law of the desert. Yet a flicker stirred. Not pride, not hope, something older. Something like the spark that keeps fire alive beneath ash. He smothered it quickly, but its warmth lingered. Epictetus emerged again, eyes black and bright, standing against a horizon of endless sand. First, endure, then act, then speak. The man who survives obscurity becomes dangerous when he finally speaks, because his words carry weight no applause can give. The creator felt this truth echo through his ribs. He had thought he was making videos, but he was forging a weapon, not to attack others, but to cut through the illusions within himself. And something else changed. He began to see other creators differently. Before, he envied them. Now, he pitied them. He saw how the successful ones danced frantically to keep the crowd's attention, addicted to noise, terrified of silence. They were chained by the very applause he once begged for. He saw their eyes flicker with desperation. He did not want that anymore. He did not want to be famous. He wanted to be free. The desert gave him that freedom. It was a strange, wild power. He could feel it pulsing in him like a hidden current. He could lose everything. Still he would create. He could vanish tomorrow. Still he would rise to the blank page. He could be forgotten. And still he would speak, because the work had stopped being a performance. It had become prayer. And though the world stayed silent, he began to feel a faint pull in the air, as if something far away had noticed, as if somewhere beneath the dunes, something ancient had begun to stir. He could not prove it. He could not see it. But when he placed his hands on the desk, the wood hummed faintly with destiny. The silence was not empty anymore. It was pregnant. He smiled then. Slow, grim, unshakable. The desert had not ended. It might never end. But he was no longer merely surviving it. He was shaping it. He was bending the void to his will. One day, the world would hear him, or not. It didn't matter, because by then, he would be unbreakable. The crack appeared so small, he almost missed it. A comment, one line, buried under hundreds of empty days. It said, "This changed the way I see myself." He stared at it, unsure if it was real. After months of silence, the words seemed impossible, like water shimmering on sand. His chest tightened. For a moment, the desert fell away. He imagined the face behind those words. Someone alone, someone tired, someone who found light in his voice. A single soul. One. His hands trembled. He caught himself reaching for the dopamine surge he had sworn to abandon. He closed his eyes, forcing stillness back into his bones. This is the trap. The first mirage. The desert does not test only your endurance in obscurity. It tests your discipline when recognition begins to whisper, because attention is poison if swallowed too soon. He walked away from the screen. He paced the room, fists tight, breath sharp. The voice of Marcus Aurelius rose in his mind like a warning carved into stone. Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance. Be ready to let it go. The words hissed through him like cold wind. He saw how easy it would be to slip, to chase more comments, to shape his voice for applause again, to become their servant. He refused. He returned to his work as if nothing had happened. He built the next video with the same iron routine. No noise, no distractions, no hope. Hours bled away like sand through glass. The comment lingered like a spark behind him, but he did not turn back to it. This was his vow, to walk forward, eyes on the path, not the mirages. Yet more came, slowly, like faint echoes. Another comment, then another. Not many, just whispers, but they landed like thunder in the quiet. He felt the old hunger stir, that ancient craving to be seen. He strangled it. He would not trade his discipline for applause. Seneca the Younger appeared then, standing behind him like a shadow of iron, words clipped and sharp as arrows. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. The sentence cut deep. He saw the truth. If he allowed praise to govern him, he would become weak again, a prisoner dressed as a king. So he built a ritual of resistance. Each time a comment appeared, he whispered "thank you" and returned to work. Each time a video gained a handful of views, he pretended he did not notice. He trained himself to walk past praise as he had walked past silence. The desert was teaching him balance, to be unmoved by neglect and unmoved by applause. But this balance was fragile. Praise has claws. He caught himself fantasizing again, imagining thousands of people watching, the graph spiking, his name spreading. He hated it. He crushed the vision like a serpent's head. This is not why I walk. This is not who I am becoming. Epictetus appeared in the corner of his mind, cloaked in dust, voice like flint striking steel. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He let those words burn him clean. He would rather be unseen and unbroken than famous and hollow. He doubled his effort. While the tiny ripples of attention swirled behind him, he plunged deeper into the work. His scripts grew sharper, heavier, carved from bone. He stripped away excess until each sentence was a blade. He filmed until his voice cracked. He edited until the screen blurred. The work consumed him, not as frenzy, but as devotion. The world began to notice, faintly, slowly, like dust rising on a far horizon. A few videos passed 100 views, one crossed 1,000. His heart lurched. Then he felt nothing. Because the man who had once starved for numbers no longer lived here. In his place stood someone colder, harder. He would not kneel to numbers again. The desert, sensing his shift, struck back with doubt. It whispered, "This is your chance. Chase it. Ride the wave." Abandon discipline. Give them what they want. If you do not, you will be forgotten again. But he had already died once in this place. He was not afraid to die again. He spoke aloud to the empty room, voice steady as stone. Let them forget. Let them leave. Let the views fall to zero. I will still be here, building. And for the first time, he realized the full meaning of what Marcus Aurelius had told him. What stands in the way becomes the way. Attention was now just another obstacle to overcome, not a prize to chase. He would not let success unmake the man the desert had forged. So he kept walking. The world flickered at the edges of his vision. Faint lights in the far distance. He did not run toward them. He moved like stone, slow and inevitable. The ripples grew. The silence cracked. But his steps did not change, because the desert had given him its final gift, indifference to everything except the work. Momentum came not as an explosion but as a rising tide, slow, steady, relentless. Numbers that had once lain flat like corpses began to twitch. Tens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Videos that once rotted unseen now sparked comment chains. He watched from a distance, as if observing someone else's life. The old version of him would have drowned in this moment, drunk on the applause, desperate to feed it, terrified to lose it. But the desert had carved out that hunger and buried it beneath miles of sand. He did not celebrate. He sharpened his routine. Yet momentum is subtle poison. It whispers that the work is working because the world now watches. It tries to reverse the equation. It tries to make applause the cause and discipline the effect. He felt it in the edges of his thoughts, the creeping temptation to create not from the fire within, but from the fear of losing what he had gained. Marcus Aurelius appeared then, walking a few steps ahead on the endless dunes, his cloak tearing in the wind. Be not elated by success, nor cast down by failure. Both are impostors. The words slammed into his mind like iron doors. He saw it clearly. Praise and rejection are twins, both distractions from the path. Both try to pull you from the fortress of discipline into the chaos of craving. So he built higher walls around his mind. He stopped reading comments. He ignored the numbers swelling like waves beneath him. He silenced all notifications. To the world, he was rising. To himself, he was still in the desert. But success has claws deeper than failure. Failure makes you question yourself. Success makes you betray yourself, and betrayal comes dressed as strategy. He caught himself thinking about trends, algorithms, what would perform. The word perform filled him with disgust. He was not here to perform. He was here to build. Seneca the Younger rose in his thoughts, eyes cold and merciless as iron. If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live by what others think, you will never be rich. The words detonated. He had begun bending again, subtly, invisibly, shaping his voice for the crowd. He cursed under his breath. No, the crowd will not own me. He returned to the core. He stripped away anything that smelled of pandering. He deleted drafts that chased trends. He wrote as if the world had gone deaf again, as if he would die tomorrow and only this work would remain. Every sentence had to be carved from bone. Every frame had to carry weight. He would not dilute his soul to keep the crowd entertained. And yet the wave grew. His channel surged. Graphs spiked like mountains. Mentions spread like fire. People began calling him gifted, visionary, lucky. He felt nothing, because the desert had burned out the need to be praised. He knew the truth. This was not luck. This was blood. This was the cost of dying in silence and choosing to rise anyway. But success has another poison. Comfort. He felt it creeping in, soft as velvet. He slept a little longer. He worked a little less. He told himself he had earned it. He almost believed it, until the desert struck again. Not with silence this time, but with chaos. One video flopped, then another, and another. The wave faltered. For a moment, fear returned. Sharp, cold, ancient. The voice of the old self hissed, "It's over. You're fading. They will forget you. You will be nothing again." Epictetus appeared then, standing in the ruins of a sandstorm, eyes blazing like embers. "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do." The words shattered the fear. He remembered, the desert is eternal. The wave is illusion. He had built himself to stand in the void, not to surf applause. If the wave vanished, he would remain. He erased the fear. He returned to ritual. He rose before dawn, stripped the work to its bones, and bled into it. The wave began to rise again. He barely noticed, because this time he was anchored. The desert had given him its last weapon, indifference to both famine and feast, and now, as momentum howled around him, he stood unmoved. He knew the secret. Fame is just another kind of silence, louder and more crowded. The desert had taught him how to breathe in silence. So he breathed and kept walking. The world now spoke his name, not in whispers, in thunder. What had once been silence was now a flood. Comments by the thousands, mentions erupting like wildfire, collaborations, sponsorships, interviews, invitations, noise, endless and deafening. He watched it like an old soldier watching fire sweep across the hills, detached, cautious, because he knew what the world never says out loud. The moment they crown you is the moment they begin sharpening the blade to cut you down. For the first time, he sensed a new danger, not failure, not obscurity, but arrival. Arrival is the softest death. It wraps itself in silk and applause and whispers, "You've made it. You can rest now." But the desert had carved that word out of him. There is no arrival. There is only becoming, and becoming has no end. Marcus Aurelius appeared again, not on the dunes this time, but seated on a throne of cracked marble, the wind howling through its ruins. Remember how soon you will be forgotten, how soon all will be forgotten. The words were cold as a blade's edge. They sliced through the illusion like smoke. Fame is a mirage. Legacy is dust. Only discipline is real. He saw the trap with brutal clarity. If he believed he had arrived, he would soften. If he softened, he would decay. And decay is louder when the world is watching. So while they celebrated him, he vanished. He closed his doors, turned off the noise, returned to the void where he had been forged. Days passed without posts. The crowd grew restless. Whispers rose. Has he disappeared? Is he done? He smiled, because they had never understood. He was never here for them. Seneca the Younger appeared in the dark of his silent studio, a shadow of scarred marble. "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." The words burned. Arrival is death disguised as comfort. The moment you believe you are finished, you begin rotting from the inside. He dismantled his systems and rebuilt them from ash. He threw away methods that worked. He broke formats that brought millions. He stripped everything to bone again. He wanted to be hungry. He wanted to suffer, because suffering keeps the blade sharp. The world screamed. Metrics plunged. Headlines called him reckless. He felt alive. He remembered the early days, the silence, the flat lines, the desert wind scouring his soul. That place had hurt. That place had saved him. Epictetus appeared now, not as mentor but as mirror, eyes black, unblinking. "No man is free who is not master of himself." The words echoed in his bones. He had become known, but he refused to become owned. He erased every trace of arrival from his mind. No trophies, no celebrations, no pauses. He moved like war. Silent. Relentless. Each new piece of work was not proof of who he was but a weapon to destroy who he had been. And as he descended deeper, something strange happened. The applause no longer felt like sound. It felt like wind passing through ruins, hollow, distant, fading even as it rose. He understood then, you do not arrive. You only keep walking until the world cannot remember who you were before the desert. So he walked, past praise, past legacy, past the illusion of being finished, because the desert had taught him the one truth the world fears most. Greatness is not a place you reach. It is a vow you renew every day, alone, in silence, while the world thinks you are done. He no longer belonged to the world, not to the crowd, not to the algorithm, not to the noise. He had crossed the invisible line. At first he didn't notice. He rose, worked, bled into the craft as always. But the work had changed. It no longer felt like effort. It felt like gravity, inevitable, immense, impossible to resist. The applause that once sounded like thunder now felt like rain on distant stone. He barely heard it. It washed off him, harmless, because applause can only stick to those who still need it, and he no longer needed anything. Marcus Aurelius appeared at dawn, standing not in the desert but in empty space. Stars scattered like dust around his feet. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The words rang through him like a bell tolling across eternity. He understood now the goal was never to be celebrated. The goal was to be inevitable. He stopped thinking in terms of videos, posts, projects. He began thinking in terms of centuries. Would this piece of work still matter when everyone alive today is dust? Would it carry truth when his name is erased from memory? If the answer was no, he deleted it. The world called this madness. He called it clarity. Seneca the Younger came to him at midnight, seated on a throne of bones in the ruins of all his past selves. Life is long if you know how to use it. The words cracked through his chest like lightning. He saw how much of life is squandered chasing ripples on the surface. He would dive to the depths. He severed the last ties to the crowd. No comments, no likes, no trends, no collaborations. He walked into the void, alone, carrying only the fire. And there, something unimaginable happened. Silence returned, but it no longer felt like the desert. It felt like the universe pausing to listen. The old fear was gone. Even the old discipline was gone. What remained was something cleaner, purer, essence. He no longer created to grow. He created to reveal. Epictetus appeared one last time, cloaked in shadow. Eyes like suns burning behind eclipses. No great thing is created suddenly. The words were soft, almost sorrowful. He understood. He was no longer trying to create great things. He was becoming one. His work stopped chasing meaning and became meaning. It stopped seeking attention and became attention. It stopped existing to be consumed and began existing to endure. The world tried to define him. Visionary, genius, prophet, myth. He let them talk. Their words scattered like leaves in wind, because he was no longer something they could name. He was not a creator. He was not even a man building in silence. He had become the silence itself, vast, unyielding, unbound. He had transcended the desert. He had become the desert. And from that place, he could see everything. The crowds chasing applause, the desperate scramble for relevance, the endless cycle of birth and decay. He watched it all with cold mercy, because he knew now, nothing lasts, not fame, not failure, not even him, and yet he continued, because the point was never to last. The point was to become, again, and again, and again. He stood at the edge of the world. There was no sand anymore, no noise, no sky, only black infinity, vast, silent, still. He had walked through obscurity, through mockery, through fire and famine and flood. He had died and rebuilt himself from dust more times than he could remember. There was nothing left of the man who once begged for views, nothing left of the boy who once flinched at silence. What stood here now was something the world could not touch. He looked back. The path behind him was gone, swallowed by the void. No trace of the struggle remained, no applause, no metrics, no proof that he had ever existed. And still, he smiled, because the desert had given him its final gift: freedom. Marcus Aurelius appeared one last time, not as a man, not even as a memory, but as light-shaped like resolve. Your power is to choose your own thought. Nothing more. The words echoed through him like thunder from the bones of the earth. He saw the truth. The world could strip him of everything: his name, his work, his body, his legacy. But it could never touch the fortress within. The world cannot defeat the man who no longer needs to win. Seneca the Younger rose from the darkness, voice like iron cooled in tears. The man who has learned to die has unlearned how to be a slave. The sentence wrapped around him like armor. He understood. The old self had died so the eternal one could walk. And Epictetus appeared too, smiling with the quiet of someone who has seen empires burn and souls endure. You are not your chains. You are the one who breaks them. They vanished. And he was alone. But this time, the solitude was not exile. It was home. He turned back to the blank page, not to conquer, not to be remembered, simply to speak truth before time erased him again. And then, faintly, he felt something. Not applause, not recognition, something deeper, something like eternity stirring. He thought of all who still wander the desert, lost in silence, starving for approval. He thought of their tired eyes, their shaking hands, their voices cracking in the void, and he wished he could place his hand on their shoulders and tell them, "You are not failing. You are forging. The silence is not punishment. It is proof you have been chosen to walk where few dare to go. You are not unseen. You are becoming. And if this story has carried something alive into your chest, then hold it close and do not let it die here." Subscribe to this channel not as entertainment, but as a vow to yourself, a daily step toward the person you are meant to become. Let it be your way of walking closer to God, of inviting discipline and light into every day. Write something in the comments as your marker, a word of power, a blessing you will live by. Strength, faith, discipline, grace, unbreakable. Write it and let the world see who you are becoming. Because one day the silence will break, and when it does, you will not be waiting for it. You will already be standing,